Live across the pond with my pontification partner, Andrew Henderson. Good afternoon, UK.
Good morning, USA, and I'm in Lincoln, not Lincoln, Nebraska, Lincoln, the real Lincoln, to see my mum at 1 o'clock today.
Wouldn't that be Lincolnshire?
Lincoln in Lincolnshire. Lincoln is the city. Lincolnshire is what you have Lincoln, Nebraska, but it should be Lincolnshire, Nebraska, really. But there you go. Who's going to, spoil your reasoning for changing the name of your
what was the purpose of there must have been a shire, was a region or a designation, because everything is called Cheshire, Lincolnshire, Hampshire, Yorkshire. What's the shire part back in the old days?
Back in the old days, I'm not going to be I'm going to guess a little bit, but I think I know that I'm right. The shire was each individual region obviously was owned by a person from the aristocracy who had a title. And so Lord Worcester, for example, so the town that he had his massive home in was Worcester. It's Worcestershire. So Lord Lincoln would have been Lincolnshire. So it really encapsulated at one time the land that they own. Now I know they've moved the boundaries now for electoral reasons, which is, I know that's happening in the US at the moment, but originally it was the ownership of land of the aristocracy that may well have been betrothed to them from the royal family when everything was completely corrupt like it is now.
Speaking of owning land, our friend in Canada has sent me a piece that is ultimately going to end up in my column today, because there is a movement within the Arizona State University anyway. I don't know that it's a widespread movement, but some whack job comes up with an idea. So much of the fight today is about property rights.
Yeah.
Well, this professor at Arizona State University suggests that we as human beings no longer should be the sole owner of our property, but the prairie dogs or the wolves or the bears or any other animal that uses the property should be deemed owner of the property, consequently have legal standing in our court system. This is part of why we had the monument designation of bear ears the other day, again by a guy named Biden. Do you want to talk about lunacy, Andrew? I got a lunacy show for you.
Well, I think the Biden administration just keeps on giving. It really does. It should have loony as a byword on the bottom of it. I mean, yesterday, the New York Post, and I'm sure you know this story, has now been tracking miners being flown into Newark airport, and in the middle of the night, as one of the good, very few, but good political correspondents pointed out. Psaki said, no, it wasn't at the middle of the night. It was 2 in the morning and 4 in the morning. So I don't know, maybe he's changed the definition of night, because actually at LaGuardia Airport, apparently, or wherever it was in New York, you're not allowed to fly in between, I think it's 10 or 11 o'clock at night and 6 o'clock in the morning. But, oh no, not unless you're bringing in minors unaccompanied from the border to be dispersed wherever nobody knows, all underage, in flights that nobody's supposed to know about. And Psaki stands there and sort of says, well, what else do you expect us to do? Well, actually, I expect people to track where children are going in your country. I think that's the first thing. No kids. No kidding.
Okay. Sue Burton has started something that we're going to continue, and we're going to make it a national phenomenon right after Let's Go Brandon. Looneyshire.
Looneyshire, yeah.
With a picture of the White House in the background.
Yeah, Looneyshire is a great idea, because words cannot describe what I'm hearing. So, for example, I want to tell you something about in the UK. There is now some data come out from Public Health England, which is explosive. I'm going to post it sometime today. I'm quite busy, but I'm going to post it. I've got it. And it shows, wait till you hear this one. It shows that if you've been jabbed, right, per million people now in the UK, if you're over 40, and I'll explain why. And actually, if you go to Josh Rogan, he describes it perfectly because he's actually put it on a video, but I've seen the figures. If you're over 40 per million people, you are now more likely to get COVID if you've been jabbed twice. And it's going to get worse if you get jabbed a third time. And the data proves it categorically for everybody over 40, 50, 60, 70, and 80. And if you think about it, I want to explain it because there's science behind this. What's happening is that as you get older, as you know, your immune system starts to deteriorate. These jabs that we like to call them, what's actually happening is they only protect you against the current strain of coronavirus. And they are only using one spike protein to try and stop your immune system from accepting it. But unfortunately, what it does is, it degrades very quickly. It speeds up in older people. But also, it makes them more susceptible because you've used up some of their immune system with the jab. It's making them more susceptible to all sorts of other diseases as well as variants of COVID. I mean, this is, and it's very, and there's a doctor that talks to him from your military explaining this on Josh Rogan, and it is so compelling because he's saying, really, it's actually, it's almost euthanasia. Now think about that, and he actually explains it scientifically as well.
But there's no news in that, Andrew. We see that happening in our community. We lost Troy September the 15th, my 45-year-old brother. In our community this week, we lost two 40-something-year-old men. It seems to attack a certain demographic in waves, and that can't be just coincidental.
Well, I agree with you, but you know what? You're talking about one person. I see all over the internet, you see the guy that said he'd never have a jab, he dies, so they highlight that person and all that sort of thing. What I'm saying is that these are big numbers that are scientific proof.
I fully understand you can't take one example and use it as the common thing, but I do detect patterns, and I can see patterns that are relevant in my area compared to the entire part of the country. In the area that Troy lived, there's a rash of 40-year-old men that have the same thing happening. It's attacking certain demographics at certain times. That is not an accident.
No. And now we just a shout out here for all of you in America. We're now in the 5th day of the blockade of the ports in northern Italy. And what I'm going to tell you, I want to tell you good news. They are obviously, they've blockaded themselves in, closed all the ports. Do you know who's supplying the food to these people? This is a really good story. Do you know?
No, I do not.
The police. Isn't that fantastic?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that fantastic? That's what we need to see worldwide. Hopefully soon it'll be the army, because at the end of the day, we have to isolate these treasonous, poisonous people.
Yeah. The police are here to protect and serve, and to protect and serve us from tyranny as well as criminals. Well, tyranny, they are criminals, but you know what I mean.
I saw a great photograph this morning, Trent, just quickly, and it said our stadiums are full of people supporting our sports teams. It says people are walking freely in shops and supermarkets, and our doctors, nurses, police, and firemen are getting sacked for not being vaccinated, and we're supposed to be in a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very telling.
So I have to get to my history tidbit before we leave, because I think it's also relevant in today's world. On this day, October 20th, 1947, the Red Scare was taking place. The Red Scare was actually where Hollywood was being interrogated, investigated, and everybody who thought the people thought they might have an allegiance to communism was interrogated, blacklisted, and I think 10 were convicted of having ties to communism.
Well, they obviously didn't get them all, did they?
Therein lies the problem. You went right to the core of the issue.
They didn't. I mean, the media, I've seen this thing about the BBC, the Washington, the New York Times, and all these CNN, CNBC. That's how they've got their ideology back. And we've all been fooled into it. They control the narrative, and when you look at the amount of money that Zuckerberg has spent to try and fix the American election, I hope the world never ever falls for it again. We've fallen for it in 1938, and we're falling for it again in 2021 and 2020.
But it's Andrew Henderson here every day bringing us great news about how people are waking up, smelling the salts a little bit at a time. Regaining
Cheers,
control
everyone.
for the farmer. For Trent Loose. No, I am Trent Loose. For Andrew Henderson. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.